Welcome to the Sharma show. Now, on today's show, we're going to talk about the popular uprising that's happening in Iran for the past few days. And people and the media aren't really talking about it as much as I think they should. And they're also skipping out on one very important aspect of these protests and of the uprising. So we're going to talk about it, and we're going to tell you all you need to know about the Iran protests as well. My name is Sham Sharma. Let's start the show. Hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of the Sham Sharma show. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. Now, for the past few days, there's been a big uprising happening in Iran. It's happening across pretty much all of the country, including the big towns and including some of the very smaller towns as well. And this is not the first time an uprising like this has happened in Iran under this Islamic regime as well. The last uprising to happen like this was the 2009 uprising, which was popularly known as the Green Uprising. Now, that uprising, as people remember or may not remember, was crushed and suppressed quite brutally by the regime and by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in Iran. But this movement feels different. This movement feels different for a variety of reasons. One of them also being that there's no clear leader in this movement. In 2009, the uprising had some clear leaders who were then arrested and put into house arrest, who are still under house arrest. But in this year's uprising, it's been a very organic uprising. It's just people who have taken to the streets in different towns across the country in Iran and are just saying that they've had enough. They've had enough of this oppressive regime, and they've had enough of this religious theocracy. So the uprising began in the Iranian city of Mashhad, which is the second most populous city in Iran. And it's actually a stronghold of the regime as well, and a lot of people are suspecting that, at least in part, some of these uprising was instigated by people of the Revolutionary Guard and of people of the Basij, which is a volunteer paratrooper outfit in Iran. Now, some of the reasons behind this uprising is that people are extremely upset with this regime. People are upset that the Iranian government and the Iranian regime is sending millions and millions of dollars overseas to fight this useless proxy war in the Middle East. And they're sending millions of dollars to outfits like the Hezbollah, and they're sending millions of dollars to arm the Shia militia in the Middle East that the Iranian people don't really care about. They're upset that all of this money is being sent overseas to things that they do not care about, whereas in Iran, the unemployment rate is high. In Iran, people are starving. In fact, in some of the smaller cities, the unemployment rate is as high as 40 to 50%. Now, people are protesting this in the streets. People are saying death to the regime. People are saying death to Hezbollah. People are saying no to Syria, no to Gaza. And of course, one of the biggest forces and one of the biggest strengths of this uprising are the women. Because arguably, after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, it was the women who were the worst affected by the regime. You know, if you look at pictures of Iran before 1979, it looks almost like Israel. It looks almost like any European city. You know, women were free. They would wear whatever they want. And often they would choose, Western gear and fashionable gear over the traditional Islamic gear. But after the 1979 revolution, this strict Islamic dress code was forced upon the women of Iran. And many of them have had enough. And many of them are going out into the streets and openly taking off their hijab, which is, by the way, it's illegal to take off your hijab in public in Iran. And a lot of women are going outside, taking off their hijabs, putting it on social media and showing it as a protest. And that's a very brave thing to do, because there are some serious repercussions of breaking the law like this, particularly by a woman in Iran. I feel like whenever it does happen, whenever this regime is overthrown, it might be tomorrow, it might be a lot later. I feel like it'll be a lot later, but the women are going to have a huge role to play in this as well. Now, when it comes to Iran, there have been some serious mistakes made by the international community. Back in 2009, when the Green Uprising was happening, the US under Barack Obama was trying to push through this nuclear deal with Iran, which, in my opinion, was a bad deal to push in the first place. But in trying to push this deal, President Obama, even though he acknowledged the uprising, but he went ahead and he said that, look, we're going to stay completely out of it. We're going to have absolutely zero involvement in this. We're just going to let the Iranian government handle it. We're just going to let the Iranian regime do what they need to do to quell this uprising. And that, in my opinion, was a pretty big mistake, because all it has led to, all that decision has led to let the regime continue, it's led to more instability in the Middle East, and it's led to more violence in the Middle East. That's it. The regime and all the sanctions that the regime has brought upon itself with the nuclear program, it seriously hurt the people, and it seriously hurt the prospects of many Iranian people. And it's really good to actually see President Trump. Whatever you say about President Trump and his personality and that he needs to stay off Twitter, I agree with all of that stuff. But when he does something good, it needs to be acknowledged as well. And it's good that he's come out and openly expressed support for the Iranian people over the regime in Iran. And I think that's a great sign, because these people can need all the support that they can get. Now I come to my gripe about why this issue is not being covered properly and as much as I'd like to see. So firstly, there's not enough coverage of this. There's not as much coverage as I'd like to see of this in the first place. And secondly, a lot of people are just saying that, this uprising is just political in nature. All it concerns itself with is the politics and the regime, and that's it. But that's not entirely true. Of course, the regime and the politics of the regime is a big factor in this uprising. But another huge factor in this uprising is that people are actually sick and tired of this theocratic system in Iran. There are dozens of videos from Iran that are proof of this as well. They're burning down the seminaries in Mashhad where the clerics go and study. They're chanting in the streets that, we don't want an Arab God. We don't want to worship an Arab God. We are Aryan. They're saying that they don't want to live in an Islamic Republic anymore. And that's a very important factor. There are already reports that quite a few number of young Iranians are actually moving away from Islamic tradition towards their ancient Zoroastrian tradition. But this is a huge deal. Like a reformation and a renaissance in Iran after an overthrow of the Islamic regime is going to have massive repercussions for the entire Middle East and for the entire planet. Just imagine a stable, secular, prosperous Iran who's actually living in peace with countries that it considers mortal enemies, rather than just being in a constant state of war with them. That'll be a huge game changer in the Middle East, and that'll be a huge step forward towards a renaissance in the Middle East and towards a renaissance in Asia in general. If people in the Middle East see that here's a country that used to live in this Islamic theocracy but now has been able to move past it and is now prosperous and secular and democratic and is living in peace with everyone, they're going to say that maybe that's the way to go. Maybe there's something there. A lot of people must be thinking, what is going to be India's response to this? Well, I personally believe that India isn't going to have much of a response, at least right now, about this whole issue, because they're in a very critical phase with the Chabahar port, and they do need all the assistance and all the cooperation that they can get from the Iranian regime in building the Chabahar port, because you have to look at the bigger picture here, because the bigger picture here is completely bypassing the Pakistan when it comes to trade in Asia. Again, a sideline and bypass Pakistan is also good for Asia in general. I can kind of understand begrudgingly that India will not be able to offer much of an opinion on this whole uprising, but I think it's incumbent upon the people of India to come out in the thousands in support of this Iranian uprising, because again, a secular, stable Iran is in the interests of India. So I think this is a great movement, and I think that this should be supported as much as possible. Now, do I think that this is going to bear fruit immediately? No. I think the solution and the overthrow of the regime and the reformation in Iran is still quite a long way away. But I do believe that a fire has been kindled. And this fire is not going to be put out this easily. And that's my opinion of the issue. Do you think you agree with me? Do you think that this reformation or this uprising in Iran can lead to a reformation in the Middle East and in Iran? And when do you think it'll happen? Do you think it'll happen soon? Do you think it'll happen late? I'd love to know your thoughts, so please let me know in the comment section below. All right, and that's today's show as well. Thank you very much for watching today's show. Again, I appreciate you. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like the episode, make sure to share the episode, and make sure to subscribe to the show's channel. Also, make sure to follow the show in these platforms right here. All right, we're going to be back again on Friday with a brand new edition of the Sharma Show, and I'm also working on creating an interview style program that hopefully we will be able to launch in the last week of January or early February, so please stay tuned for that. So my friends, I will see you Friday, and until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.